Hi, this is Mother Murderer Podcaster, a show about the most outrageous and the best made for TV movies of the 80s and 90s.
I'm Katie Madonna Lee, a filmmaker.
And I'm Lewis Jordan, a writer.
I grew up watching TV movies. I love them. They're a big influence in my work.
And I'm new to TV movies, but I'm excited to learn about them. And the TV movie that we're talking about this week is the 1989 CBS TV movie Tarzan in Manhattan, starring Joe Lara, Kim Crosby, and Tony Curtis. Now, Katie Madonna Lee, tell us about your journey of discovering Tarzan in Manhattan, because it is not what it seems on first glance.
No. I I was really looking for an escapist. I was doing my deep dive into YouTube and I was looking for some escapism, some good old I wanted to watch a cheesy TV movie from the 80s. And wow. So I was like, what? Tarzan in Manhattan? And I saw it come up in my feed and I was like, I have to I have to watch this. And I thought it was honestly, I thought it was like a Bollywood movie. And
That fair. That's fair.
yeah, I thought it was going to be I thought it was going to be a foreign film where I thought it was going to be like Samurai Cop or something. Like I really did. Like it was made by somebody from a different country who thought this is what Americans like to see. So there would be
Yeah,
that funny,
like a
like,
Czechoslovakian action movie or something.
yeah, something trying to be American, but was just, yeah. So, but I turned it on and it was a real movie. And so when I first watched it, I was like, how come my first reaction when I saw Joe Lara swinging from a vine was, how come Lewis doesn't know about this? Because Lewis, during the pandemic, everybody went through a huge Tarzan renaissance with Brendan Fraser because
Yeah,
he
George of
yeah,
the Jungle.
George of the Jungle. So I was thinking, how come Lewis doesn't know about this? He seems to know a lot about discovered hot, good-looking men with potential of the 80s. This has to be a foreign film. So I was watching it, and I couldn't stop. I mean, the gorilla in the beginning, but as soon as I got to the scene where you were looking at his face, I was like, this man is stunning. Who is he? Who is he? And I was
Hmm.
like, how come, what happened to him? Who is this guy? He has to have gone on to do stunt work. He has to have gone on to do something amazing. So I got out my little phone and I was Wikipedia in the movie. And I was like, oh, okay, he died. Oh, that's really tragic, And then I looked and I was like, I said on Wikipedia very casually, oh, died in a plane crash with his wife and his church, Gwen Shamblin. And I was like, I know that name. How do I know that name? And then when I looked and I saw the makeup, the face of Gwen Shamblin, I
The
was like,
hair of Gwen
oh,
Shamblin.
the hair, I lost it. I couldn't watch the TV movie the same. His beauty, his good looking looks and his beauty took on a whole sinister meaning just by association. And I never knew his backstory. I didn't know anything else about him. I just knew that he was the most absolutely, I mean, beautiful man. Like he has beautiful eyes, he has beautiful structure.
Cheekbones.
He's cheekbones. I mean, he looks like a mix of Jared Leto and Zac Efron. Like if you know what I'm saying, like he looks like Zac Efron did when he did The Paperboy. He has those really beautiful eyes and that nice tan and that
And a
not
perfect
over
body. No body fat, just like perfect, like hunky model body.
yeah. And he said that. I mean, he said because he wanted to give I mean, he was a male model. He literally was, and this is interesting because we just did Making of a Male Model, and Joe Lara was. In fact, he was gonna go to play college football, but he was recruited to be a male model instead. So
Yeah.
he didn't play football. Instead, he was pretty good, I guess. I don't know how true that is. Like, I don't know if he's a
Well,
if this,
yeah, see,
you know.
this is the thing, is that now we don't entirely trust him because he literally died in a plane crash with his wife, who was a cult leader.
Yeah, and
And
you know, he
so who not only was a cult leader, but like is an infamous cult leader from this HBO documentary that everybody has seen, and they've done all of these memes of her picture being like the Karen final form, like Pokemon, like um and so it's just yeah, there's those similarities, but it's wild. It's a wild, like, just context for this silly movie.
and I, with my mom will come in sometimes when I'm watching TV movies and she'll say, "Ooh, what's this?" And she saw him. She's like, "Ooh." I mean, my mom was like, "Who is this? Oh, wow, he's good looking." And she's like, "Oh, I love Tony Curtis, and all this kind of stuff." But when I showed her, I said, "Hold on." And I put on The Way Down. And she was like, "No, what?" Oh, like she had this sober moment. And to me, when I watch interviews with Joe Lara on his website, which is still active. His website is still up, but I went on it, and there's an interview between him and a female reporter, and the female reporter is acting the way horny men act, like when they interviewed Pamela Anderson in the 90s, just like really
Hmm.
gross, like, "Oh, what do you look for in a woman? Do you have a girlfriend?" Like, like, "Oh, you're just so beautiful, I can't quit looking at you." And he's like, totally like, "Yes," like, obviously he's used to this. He's just used to having this kind of interview with the vampire mystique where he memorize, controls and
Mesmerizes.
mesmerizes. Sorry, I have my Invisalign in. These women around him, hypnotizes them, and she just was like gawking over him, and just most of the interview was just kind of like female sexual harassment, which is just like goo goo gaga type stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and he was just sort of like, "Yeah, I know." And it's fascinating because you see, in my opinion, watching the transformation of him as this beautiful Tarzan man with the perfect body, perfect physique, and having this control over women, to being with Gwen Shamblin and seeing the way he looked at the end. I mean, yes, people age, but he looked really exhausted and skeletal and pale, and just like he didn't look healthy. He looked like the true character of himself was coming through. Like his true the bait was like no longer there, and you could see the shark teeth.
Yeah.
He didn't look very happy. He
No.
looked like, he was phoning it in. And I'm pretty sure I'm sure he was told by the people around him when he was, gorgeous and 27, 28, 30, 35, you're going to be so big, you're going to be so huge. I mean, everyone that's how LA people, showbiz people talk. So I'm pretty sure how he ended up was a shock to him too, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. It's so anyway, here. Let's we'll get into the movie. I'll give a little summary of the plot, and
Go ahead.
then we can get into the movie, and then we'll move on to Gwen, um, the world's foremost troll doll impersonator, and then and what happened with her and Joe, and how that affects the way that we see this whole thing. So, and I want to note this. wasn't originally shot to be a TV movie. Like a lot of TV movies, this was shot to be a pilot for a potential TV series. I guess they wanted to see what the response would be like. Is a backdoor pilot, I guess is the term. And you can tell because for the villain, instead of saying starring, it says special guest star. What is it? Jan Michael Vincent or yeah. So, and just the thought of this being like a weekly TV series kind of blows my mind to where it might go. So anyway, okay, this is the plot. Tarzan, played by Joe Lara, is the lord of the jungle somewhere in Africa, swinging around on vines in a tiny loincloth that kind of flies up in the back when he's swinging, so that then if you look closely, you can kind of see his butt. Not that I was looking or anything. And it's the regular Tarzan origin story. He's the child of wealthy, noble parents who crashed. His airplane crashed in the jungle, and he survived and was raised by apes. And his sidekick is Cheetah, the chimpanzee. This is the same Tarzan that they've been doing since Johnny Weissmuller back in the 30s and 40s. And so it opens with some hunters come into the jungle and they shoot Tarzan's gorilla mom and they kidnap Cheetah. And his only clue is that they left a box of matches from La Bête Noire, a Manhattan nightclub that's on like East 55th Street. So of course, Tarzan, next thing we know, Tarzan is on a plane to New York City. And and then Warren Zevon's "Leave My Monkey Alone" is playing while he's reading like New York on $5 a day, and you're like, okay, this movie knows that it's silly. Okay, I wasn't sure, but now I know. So Tarzan is nabbed by immigration for having a fake passport, and he's put in jail. And then he escapes by pulling the bars off a window and riding on top of a bus into the city, where he meets Jane Porter, played by Kim Crosby, who's a tough-talking lady cab driver with a master's in computer science from NYU for some reason. And she is fascinated by Tarzan. And then in a scene that clearly influenced George of the Jungle, she helps him buy a suit to get into this nightclub. And there they discover that the people who took Cheetah are connected with this Bridemore Foundation, this charity organization. So then Jane's father, Archimedes, who's played by Tony Curtis, is a private investigator. And he doesn't like Tarzan at first, but then Tarzan saves Jane from a Jewish Latino gang.
Juan Lipschitz.
Which wins her father over. And then Jane and Tarzan and Archimedes crash a costume party at the Bridemore Mansion, which is the house of B.B. Brightmore, played by Jan Michael Vincent, who's the super rich philanthropist and hunter. And Tarzan discovers that Cheetah is alive in a laboratory that's hidden on the mansion grounds. And someone has been cutting up chimpanzees and experimenting on their brains. So they escape with Cheetah, and then Archimedes goes to the Brightmore skyscraper building to find some incriminating documents about what's happening. But then Brightmore finds out, and he sends his goons to blow up Archimedes' office, his PI office. And he does, but then Tarzan and Jane show up, and then Tarzan rips off his clothes and climbs up an elevator shaft to save Archimedes. And then while Archimedes is in a coma in the hospital in a very dramatic scene, Tarzan goes back to the office. He finds the photos of these documents, and through that, he and Jane find out that Brightmore is going to bring a ship 100 chimps to Bridemore Mansion the next day to have their brains cross-sectioned. So they go to Bridemore Mansion, and they're captured by Bridemore. And he reveals that he's grinding up the brains of chimps to feed them to other chimps, who then take on the intelligence of the first chimp. And then apparently this discovery is going to make him millions and he's going to take over the world. You know, I don't know. But, and so now he decides he needs to start experimenting on human brains like Tarzan and Jane's. So then Tarzan has this ability to talk to animals, but Jane, for some reason, is inspired by that and talks to the guard dog who unties her. And then she grabs the guard's gun and rescues Tarzan and all of the caged chimps. And then Bridemore and his goons try to hunt Tarzan and Jane down. But Cheetah brings Tarzan a bow and arrow. And he takes the bad guys down with his bow and arrow. And Bridemore is arrested by the cops. And the chimps are returned to the jungle. And then Archimedes recovers. And Jane decides to join his PI business. So then Tarzan and Cheetah have tickets to go home to Africa. But then Tarzan and Jane finally consummate their romantic tension and they kiss. And Archimedes offers Tarzan a job working for his PI agency. And he accepts. And then Cheetah does something funny and everybody laughs. And then we end with everybody laughing. And so this literally would have been like Tarzan, Private Eye.
You're right. It would have been.
So like, I guess, yeah, let's start out talking about Joe Lara. So we gave a little bit of background on him.
Yeah.
And where he came from, and according to this, The Way Down, this HBO documentary about Gwen Shamblin, he, while he was going to acting school after modeling, he never really had a job. He just sort of like lived with a series of sugar mommies. But then he got like a Jordache campaign, and then that led to him doing Tarzan, which was his first movie. So what do you think about his performance in this?
Well, I took notes, and one thing I know, he knew he was there for the female gaze, and he was not afraid of that at all. Like, he was like, "Here I am, eat me up. This is what I'm here for." He did not have a problem with his physicality. Like, he was very, he definitely has athletic ability. Like, he was able to do the physical stunts. So all those things were physically, he was convincing. However, his faces and his emotional, like when he had to show big emotion, like, or he wasn't very animated. For instance,
when his gorilla mom died, you mean? And he's like,
yeah, Mama.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a little rough. And then when he was like, they took Cheetah, like when he runs to Joseph, and he to look, I think maybe for him, he had been saved in many ways from feeling like extreme sadness and despair his whole life, or tried to escape it. And he had means to, whether it be sugar mamas, drugs, because according to the documentary, they said he used drugs in the past, things like that.
Yeah.
So it seems to me he didn't have a lot of acting when it came to acting. I'm not saying he didn't have emotional depth. I'm saying he wasn't very good at going to that toolbox and showing it, especially, for instance, in the scene where it could have been really fun when he discovers, the remote control. Like, he's in a amazing New York apartment, by the way, that she could not afford, but it's stunning, huge huge
Yeah.
fantasy apartment. And he turns on the TV remote and the stereo goes off and then the phone rings and there's an answering machine. And I was trying to figure out from that when I was watching it, I was like, does he already know about these things? Because I wasn't buying his, oh, this is too much. I wasn't getting, oh, this is too much. I was just sort of getting like, he just sort of looked like Frankenstein versus confused, very stiff. So his actual, he was really good at being like a dumb blonde and being like, oh, money, and taking out, oh yeah, I see, like kind of being like he was better at that than actually showing a display of any big emotion, animation. He was really good at being like a lost puppy and take care of me. One thing I did notice was Jane, when Jane paid for his suit. So right away I was like, oh, sugar mama. Like,
Yeah.
every even in this, I felt like Tarzan was a great role for him because it did mimic his life in a way.
That he
In
had this
that-
woman taking care of him.
And he kind of knows, like, I know, oh, I'm stupid, like, oh, what, I'm dumb, I'm just
Yeah.
from the jungle, I don't know, like, take care of me.
Yeah.
He was really good at that.
Yeah, I think that so it's interesting to compare and contrast this to Brendan Fraser in George of the Jungle, because I feel like this movie, first of all, just with the tone of this movie, I think like it's a comedy. I think it's written as a comedy. I think that it's acted by Kim Crosby and Tony Curtis as a comedy. Joe Lara plays it completely straight, which might work for like unintentional camp, but this movie is so self-aware, and Brendan Fraser is smart enough and good enough of an actor that he gave a full comedic performance that really carried that movie and set the tone, and the direction of George of the Jungle had a really energetic comedic tone. So you knew that this was kind of like a self-aware meta kind of thing. I feel like parts of this are really funny, but sometimes I feel like the director didn't give it the energy that it needed to really take off as a comedy. And I think having Joe Lara at the center of it, playing everything straight, he didn't know how to take some of those comedic moments home. So he was just sort of like, he was just kind of there to look at and to do the action sequences. And then Jane and Archimedes did like the heavy lifting as far as and Cheetah driving, a chimpanzee driving a car.
That was funny. I'm sorry. And my mom was like, oh, I like this. And all of a sudden he was, oh, these poor animals are this is the irony of films that are like, because it's pro-animal. Like, that's what the message is very pro-animal and anti-trophy hunting and
anti-experimentation and like animal testing.
Yeah, and you empathize with these animals, but the problem is like when you use live animals in movies, is they're not treated well. So like that is the kind of problem I'm having, is like, oh, it's cute, but like the way a child star is cute, like I don't want to know what's going on behind the scenes. Like it's a little sad too,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think Joe Lara is a comedian.
No,
I don't.
He's
think
an
he
action
is.
star.
He's an action star, and I just don't think even off screen he knows how to not take himself like he's Man of Steel. Like he carries himself that way even in the home videos we see, like the YouTube channel with Gwen. Life with Gwen and Joe.
Yeah.
Gwen and Joe, I also think, the director, Michael Schultz,
Yes.
directed Car Wash. So
He
it's not
directed
like yeah.
so he knows he can do comedy, but he also directed Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band with the Bee Gees.
I didn't see that. Is that bad?
It's like one of the most infamous movie flops ever. It really messed up. It like stopped the Bee Gees cold for a minute because
No.
it really didn't work. It really got savaged by the critics, and it's infamous as being like a huge flop where people just being like, why did you do this? This doesn't work on any level. So, I think maybe he might, Car Wash is very naturalistic. Like there's, like the Queen is giving a big performance, like the gay character, but the rest of it is very like chummy and naturalistic. And that's a great movie. But I felt like with this, it was never able to, like, an action comedy has to have a particular tone to it so that you can feel the action coming in does not doesn't feel like an abrupt switch from the comedy,
Yeah.
And with this, it was like, now we're doing action, now we're funny, now we're doing action, now we're serious.
Yeah, because everything, because it was confusing to me because he was very serious. And when he met, like, the gang who, like, I'm Juan Lipschitz, I was like...
The product of a very confused, star-crossed marriage. Like, these screenwriters are funny. These screenwriters were writing something goofy and funny. And like, and I noted something. I was watching a little bit of it, and it's not necessarily a comic book movie, but it's kind of like a comic book movie. And now we take comic book movies very seriously. Now comic book movies, we don't even need to suspend disbelief. That whole like, you will believe a man can fly thing from Superman, we already believe. But back in the 80s, it was still a little bit silly to be doing a superhero movie. And so they always kind of camped it up a little bit. Even the Superman movies had a campy element to them, kind of a pop art element. And I think that they felt like in order to do Tarzan, they had to like camp it up a little bit, or otherwise people would just like, they would already be laughing at it. So like, let's laugh with it kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Tony Curtis, what I love, so it's clear to me Joe Lara is like the Pam Anderson of the film. He's the female gaze 100%, especially when he disrobes to go into a building and they have a close-up of his groin area as he takes his pants off.
Oh my God. Listen, and he takes his clothes off. It's another way. It's like Superman. Every time that he has to jump into action, he takes his clothes off and is there in his tiny little loincloth. He does that like 10 times throughout this movie. I'm like, why bother putting them back on?
I know.
Honestly.
And I'm like, how do you fit your loincloth over
in those tight jeans?
Yeah, so there's like a lot of questions there, but
oh my God. Do you have a loincloth in those jeans, or you're just happy to see me?
And Tony Curtis is always shaming him. Like so it's clear to me he is the female character in this. Like, the Jane is like, oh, let me save you. Like, I'll take care of you. Like, you don't have to give me anything, type that thing. And the dad is like, put your clothes on. That's his Tony Curtis is second to the last line. Like, he might be dead, and his last line is, and one more thing, keep your clothes on.
Yeah.
He's about to die, and that's what he tells Tarzan. So to me, it's very it's that whole. That's one thing I liked about the film, is that it is showing like but it's funny because when women are, there's more this shame, the body shame of female experiences on screen is serious. Is
Yes.
serious. But this is like, haha, what? Like, really? He can do what he wants, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good point. Um, so speaking of Tony Curtis, I I thought he was fantastic in this. Now, for people, if people who don't know, Tony Curtis was a big Hollywood star during the 50s, and he was in films like The Sweet Smell of Success and Some Like It Hot with Marilyn Monroe, and but then, by the 80s, he was doing a lot of TV like most people from that era. And he was not playing, he used to be a total dreamboat. And, now he was playing like the comedic character actor. And I thought, like, he knew exactly what kind of project he was in. He knew he was kind of slumming, but he was having a great time with it. He was just so relaxed, having so much fun. And there was this there's this great moment where he and Cheetah are like watching TV, hanging out on the couch, and he had this line that kind of like fits the whole movie, where he was like, "This is cozy. It's bizarre, but it's cozy." But I thought, like, every time, he's such a pro, and he is just effortlessly funny. And I noticed him coming up with little bits of physical comedic business to do that might not necessarily have been in the script. Uh, I was just like, this man is a pro, and he's so good. You can't even see him sweating.
No, he was my favorite part of the movie, honestly,
Yeah, he's the
because
MVP.
he came in and he lifted the film up. Like, as soon as we got Jane, you know, I was like, oh, it's getting better. And then, because we got some personality,
Yes.
going, we had some personality, because it was confusing. I was trying to figure out what kind of movie it was, because Joseph was like, he had his Tarzan's civilian
Uh,
friend in the beginning
in the jungle. Yeah, yeah.
in the jungle. He had some good one-liners, but I couldn't tell what was going on, like where it was landing, what kind of tone it was. But when Tony Curtis came in, he really like pumped it up and gave it showbiz and pizzazz and energy, and made me appreciate the movie, actually, because he really took control of the tone. He took control of it.
Yes, yes, and I think it was really him and Kim Crosby, and also just shooting on location in New York in the 80s, I think, brought this energy to the movie that really carries you along. I was thinking to myself, I was like, this is the kind of movie that when you were a kid, you would see like a rerun on like Sunday morning, and you would just start watching it, and you would know that it was silly, but you would get into it. You would be like,
Yeah.
oh, this is kind of fun. It sneaks up on you, the movie, but I think,
Yeah.
especially those two just bring so much charm. Now, with Kim Crosby, I thought this was so. I was like looking her up, like, who is this actress? So she was the original Cinderella in Sondheim's Into the Woods, and I remember seeing there's that version that's filmed for TV with Bernadette Peters, and she's in that, and she's a great singer. She's hilarious. She's got this very like sort of casual conversational quality that you see, and from what I could tell, I think she did this right after she left Into the Woods, like immediately after. And she played Cinderella in Into the Woods. And then at the costume ball, she's dressed as Cinderella. And there's this
Yes.
whole recurring thing where it's like she leaves a glass slipper, and then she comes back to have dinner with Jan Michael Vincent, who is dressed as the charming prince, and then he starts like drinking champagne out of her glass slipper, which is so like
Gross.
he
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
That was weird.
yeah. I feel like that might have been like an improv moment or something. But yeah. But I thought it's not an easy part, I guess, because she's coming on with this like thick New York accent and all of this, but I thought she was wonderful. She's like, hold on to your loincloth, it's gonna get breezy in here. Like,
Yeah. I felt Annie Potts energy from Ghostbusters. That's what I got. Like, this is Ghostbusters. Like, I got that. Like, and I love Ghostbusters. I have lots of emotions tied up in that movie. So,
oh yeah,
any callback to Annie Potts and Ghostbusters is great. But what I love is, like, I did believe her as all the things she says she was, a New Yorker, a master's in computer science, cab driver. And what was funny to me, I have experience driving, for the public. And I have to say, I would not pick up a guy in a loincloth. I'm sorry, because I was like, he's a bad tipper. The first thing I'm thinking is, like, if, you're like, wait a minute. And she picks him up, and I started laughing right away because I was like, and I'm thinking, okay, she's picking him up because he's hot and he's good looking. I think that is like the motive because, like, where's this wallet? Where's this
She
money?
says that at one point. She says, "Where's your wallet?" And then he's got like the jewels that his family, that he retrieved from the crash. And then of course they bring that back around when they're getting the clothes. Then she's like, there are these like sissy assistants at the clothing store, and she's like, show him your family jewels. They say, I beg your pardon. But
they want to see him.
Yeah. But I thought, and then I thought that she really invested a lot in her relationship with Tony Curtis too. And I believed them as like a father and daughter, where she's like, Dad, leave me alone. Stop hovering over me. Like, let me live my own life. And then when her dad was in the hospital from this very silly accident, then she's like hysterical and really selling it. Like in the dramatic moments, she really sells it. So I don't know. I was like, she's a really good actress, and I wish we would have. I think she just sort of went into theater. She did a lot of work in theater after this, but I think that was sort of where her home was in theater.
Yeah, I think honestly, especially for TV, like TV acting and theater acting are so different. And in general, film and theater are very separate. And I think for a lot of people, when they come over to film, it's from what I've seen, it's a shocking transition at first. It's a bit of a shock because you don't rehearse as much, and it's a different culture, different everything. I always say it's kind of like if you are an actor, like, theater is like structured and safer and like, whereas film is like feral. It's out in the wild and you have no control over many things. So
yeah. I also wanted to note that like the score is like not that amazing, but they have Grace Jones pull up to the bumper playing in Jane's cab, and I was just like, I had a little moment where I wrote in my notes, oh my god, they're playing the 12-inch mix of Grace Jones's Pull Up to the Bumper. This is the greatest movie of all time.
I knew you were gonna like that. I knew it because I played that in my car. So you said the score wasn't that good, but the guy who made the score is like, he's a major film. He's a major songwriter, thematic composer. He did The Love Boat. He's done a lot of theme songs. He's a big deal.
Yeah. No, I didn't think that it was bad. I felt like it did its job. It just didn't. It didn't like
pop.
I guess. Yeah, it didn't pop for me. Which I suppose then that's doing its job, because it's not supposed to pop. It's supposed to just highlight the action and just be there to serve it. This isn't the sort of thing where they were like, give us a really like hip, interesting, unusual score.
Twin Peaks.
No Twin
Tarzan.
Peaks for this.
Tarzan meets Twin Peaks.
Oh my God. But yeah, so I think, overall with this, like, it's a little confused, but it's not like some other movies that we've covered where we're like, this is camp, and because it knows that it's goofy. It knows that it's campy. It's playing up the campiness. It's self-aware. It's a little tonally confused. It's goofy, but like, it's charming. I think it's a charming movie. Especially with the fish out of water stuff.
I really enjoyed it, and it won me over with Tony Curtis and the cab driver, lady cab driver.
Yeah.
I love
Yes.
that, and I loved Tony Curtis. But the message about the animals, like when he goes in and he's a very empathetic man, and he's like upset. He sees the trophy hunting taxidermy, and I love that it's very pro animal, and you have to speak their language. That means a lot to me, because I like, animals are children, in my opinion. They're just because they don't speak your language doesn't mean that they're not worthy of life and the same rights that humans have. In some cases, they're more civilized than humans. So I really appreciated that I really liked was the message of justice, like this dirty billionaire, who never gets, and that's what I liked, is like they showed this, billionaire, he's bored because he gets everything he wants. So he has to do something insane to keep himself stimulated. And he's doing something bad. And then, he goes to jail, which, that's not the justice we get to see in the world, but it's the justice we get to see in this movie. And I did like that. I did like, okay, the bad guy goes and the good people and the animals live. And that to me is, I need to see something like that, because the media now is very like, it's taken the 90s grit and is like, everything is like, look at this dystopia. And I'm like, I don't need to.
Just look outside, honey.
or go to work and have to deal with people. Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
literally. Like, we don't,
so I really like to see a heartwarming, something nice, something fun where people just get along and they're nice, and it's not like, look, I'm evil, I'm gonna, I really like watching something where people aren't like, being abusive to each other, and they, it was good. I like that. One other thing I wanted to bring up with the computer science thing, the reason why they said that was because she takes apart the alarm to get into, so that they basically set that up in Act 1 when she's introduced. I have a computer science, degree in computer science. Therefore, I will be able to decode all these alarms and just understand security systems. So
they wanted to give her a function in this, like, private investigator partnership thing. Yes. But it was a little clunky, sort of like how in action movies they have girls be like, yeah, my dad's in the military. He taught me how to use a gun. Always.
And they showed that in this, because one of the photos he looks at when he's like looking around her apartment is her little girl holding a giant gun. And I was like, yeah.
And then at the end, she literally is like shooting down a helicopter with a machine gun.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's so it's like new. It's not new to her. Like, yeah, always. Yeah. But I appreciate it. I have a master's and I'm driving a cab because, like, that is the current climate of the world right now.
It is.
I have a PhD and I'm a stripper. I have this and I'm doing this because, academia and adjuncting and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, oh, wow, this movie foretold the job market of 2022.
Yeah. No, it's true. And it was, so um yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that you recommended this. So then after this, uh Joe Lara, he did a couple of movies like just like sort of B action movies. And then he in 1996 he did a Tarzan TV series, but it was very different in tone from this. It was like I watched part of an episode and it was based on the original books, but it looks, let me tell you, it looks terrible. Like the scripts are not bad. The scripts are actually like more realistic, and it's the first episode is guest starring our favorite fashionable crackhead Dennis Christopher.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then it it just doesn't have the budget, and there's all of these like monsters that he's fighting, and they look kind of like off-brand Muppets, and the whole thing just kind of looks like a Eastern European kids show. Like it doesn't it doesn't quite work. It's not a Hercules or a Xena from that era.
Yeah. Well, they actually shot it in location in Africa, and it was one of the few Tarzan projects to do so. But the reason they didn't do a second season is because the distribution company filed bankruptcy. So
yeah, I'd never heard of that company before. I kept trying to look at what, but somehow it was syndicated, but it was only one season, and I don't understand how that works.
They could have, what I think they probably paid to play. Maybe it was a paid to play kind of thing. Maybe they did something like that. They paid for it to be up. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But they went bankrupt, so.
Yeah. So then Joe kept, doing action movies up until about 2000, and around that time, the acting career kind of petered out, and then he and his then girlfriend Natasha Pavlovich, they have a child in 2010, and they moved to Nashville, and he's trying to do country music there and get a country music career going. And then he and Natasha split. And there's this is the part in the documentary when I lose my sympathy for him, is when I was willing to be okay with him being kind of, a gigolo. That's fine, like play him if you got him. But then when it's like he doesn't want to move to Chicago, and then to keep Natasha from having custody of their child, he reports to the police that she was sexually abusing their daughter, which was a lie. And it takes her like a long time to prove that she was, like, the police found out, and they had to like interview everybody. And I was like, you snake. That's a terrible thing to do. But with your own, the mother of your child and your own daughter, ooh.
That was one of those things that to me was, if he was capable of doing that, what else did he do in his past that was so? Because it just kind of, it just sort of like was so easy to do, and he thought, and some of the videos she has of him being like, you need help, get serious help, you're sick. It just, the ugliness in his soul at that point, the ugliness he was capable of inflicting on somebody who'd known him for years, who has a child with, very manipulative. And I can only imagine when, in the documentary, one of their mutual friends between Joe and Natasha was describing him, as a, gigolo, and having these sugar mamas, that he did something to one of his sugar mamas where she set his motorcycle she bought for him as a Harley Davidson on fire. So all I can think of is, wow, like he has been just like, well, this isn't serving a purpose for me anymore. So I'm just going to I don't care. I'm going to do whatever I want now. And I don't think that's the first time he did something that awful. It was just the first time we heard about it in the documentary, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And, so then speaking of manipulative, self-serving people with no ethics, he meets Gwen Shamblin, who, a little background on her, in case you don't know, she was born in Memphis, Tennessee, in 1955, and she grew up in this very conservative church called the Church of Christ. And then she struggled with weight in college while she was studying to be a nutritionist. And she sort of joined her religious upbringing with her weight struggles and came up with this thing called the Way Down diet, WEIGH, down, in 1986. And the whole thing was, you can eat anything and you don't have to exercise, but you can only eat when you're physically hungry. And then if you feel the urge to snack, you have to pray to God and try to find the satisfaction that you would find in that food in God. And then it became huge. And workshops, Way Down workshops in churches, not just all over the country, but in like 70 different countries. Her books were selling everywhere. She was all over the TV. It was, she got this massive business going. But then something turned from there, because lots of people have that. But then you could argue that it was a totally craven money-making decision, or you could believe that she started really believing her own press, but she believed now that like her approach could fix any problem, and then she started her own church called the Remnant Fellowship Church around 2000, and based it in like a very wealthy area of Tennessee, Brentwood. And Remnant, according to her, is the only true church. They're the only ones who'll be saved. And if you aren't losing weight, or if you're gaining it back, it's because you're doing her program in a false church, and you need to follow her to the true church to actually lose weight. And her church rejected the Holy Trinity, which was a big thing. And then that was kind of a big scandal, and a lot of churches like stopped carrying her program because she would not recognize like the Holy Spirit and Jesus. It was just all about God. But that then she had this church, and then what things did you find alarming about this church in the documentary?
All of it? I mean, I don't know. It's okay. Well, first of all, let me tell you, I have an experience with evangelicals, and me and you both do. Growing up in South Bend, there's a huge evangelical population because of Bethel, because of Calvary Temple, because of Lee Summerall, and all these evangelical churches. They're just everywhere. They're huge. There's all different types of churches in the South Bend, okay, except the Southern persuasion. But there's a couple Church of Christ churches up there, and there's Catholicism, and a lot of people who were scarred by Catholicism and abused end up becoming evangelicals. We see that a lot in South Bend. But at first I was like, oh, it's just, typical evangelical stuff. That Chick-fil-A enthusiasm, like I just want to get out there and work for God. I want God to have his way. I want God to reach you. Like, I mean, this is not something new to me. I've heard this my whole life. Like, this is not new, and it's very Calvary Temple. It's the whole, like, I dealt with this in work culture. I dealt with this, like, in Notre Dame even. Like, this is not the Notre Dame way. They would always say, like, this is not the Notre Dame way. And I don't know what that means at all. Like, it's just like, okay, what are those values? I don't see them, because to me, all you care about is money. Like, you can tell me you want God to have his way all you want, but I look at the surroundings, and I look at your shoes, and I look at the building and the property, and all I see is that you value money. And that's all I see in these churches. Like, that's why one of my really good friends who she's like, Katie, you just got to go to a living room church, because, and I was like, oh, I've never gone to a living room church. Like, people who actually just go to different people's living rooms and they have church there. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. How did that go over my head? And it's like, oh, because every church you pretty much have been invited to has been like, we need to have this building and put all the resources into looking a certain way. But the biggest thing that came to me was the salesmanship. It was very Channel 11. Channel 11 in South Bend was the televangelistic channel, the over the top Christian channel that was always pushing MLMs, pushing products, always having kind of these false religious figures. No Catholics, okay, but everything was like over the top. I want to make this clear. That was not happening. Not on the evangelical channel. But it was always like that. They always have different ministries that are selling you, like they'd have Joyce Meyer, they'd have Joel Osteen. Those are more like actually accessible pastors that kind of
mainstream kind of
mainstream, and kind of they have a lot of money, but they actually say things that are palatable. Like, you're like, oh, okay, that's not bad. Like, okay, I get that. But like, you have these other people where it's like they are just pure snakes. They're showing you, like, I just want God to have his way, give me money. Like, Channel 11 in South Bend still has the Jim Bakker show. Jim Bakker,
cojones for him to be doing that.
He has a show and he's doing the same thing. If you still like, he's asking you to bring him money, that if you give him money, you'll be saved from the end times. Same stuff, same stuff. And like, to give our listeners some context here, is me and Lewis, we're from South Bend, and there was a big, like, kind of AG church in South Bend called Calvary Temple. He was invited to it. I went to it. I was real little, not with my parents, but as a preschool. So I got the whole, like, AG, which was a Jim Bakker church. The whole, like, satanic panic, and you got a high emotion, but you don't really know what you're believing. It's really emotional, and you feel it, and it feels good. So you're like, yeah, I'll buy it. But what happened was that church kind of disintegrated because of what happened with Jim Bakker, the scandals. Yeah. And that he basically robbed his fellowship. It was more not that he raped Jessica Hahn. It wasn't that he sexually assaulted her, raped her, and threatened her and intimidated her. It was that he was using money to pay people off and to fund his lifestyle, and it was tax evasion and things like that. It was financial crimes. But so those are the things that have scarred me, like, oh, false. Anytime I see someone, oh, we're doing this for God today, I'm like, how can you still eat the shit sandwich they're giving you?
Yes. And I think Gwen hit on this very particular thing where it's like these twin obsessions, where it's like God and weight loss and putting those together. And there was something about now, I mean, I'll say just with her, with the way that she is, I felt like she was sort of like a personified eating disorder. Like if anorexia was a person, that person would be Gwen Shamblin, because she had to be perfect and you have to be perfect. And she's preaching obedience, control, judgment, keep up appearances. And if you're thin, then you're holy. And if you're not, then you're sinful. And it made me think that's like the self-hatred at the core of like anorexic and disordered eating thinking. And it made me think of that TV show Physical, the internal monologue in Rose Byrne's character, where she's just, she presents a very perfect front, but then she's like, you stupid fat idiot, you're stupid, you're so fat, you're so, and to other people also, judging them so intensely and judging herself so intensely. And I was like, Gwen Shamblin has that voice, and she heard that voice, and she thought that voice was God.
Amazing. Yeah, that was when you sent that to me, that observation, I was like, you are spot on. Because I, as a female, in New York City, I've been friends with many other white ladies with eating disorders, and I've roomed with them. And when I walk in, I'm a thick woman. And when I say thick, I mean healthy thick. Like, I don't mean like whatever. Anyway.
Yeah.
And the hatred in their eyes, like my oversized thighs or my big arms is going to rub off on them. I had a roommate in music camp who was British. She was English. And she would get up at 5 a.m. and she would go exercise for 2 hours. And then she tried not to be around me. In her eyes, she was doing that monologue. I could see it. And I even said to her, because she was so mean to me. She was so unfriendly to me. And I had a rift against her because, she was English and whatever. Anyway, she was just really uppity and talked to me like I was a dumb American. So I was like, you can't stand looking at me, can you? I totally did. The girl interrupted like you. I'm like, look, and I'd shake my fat arms. I'm like, look, oh, it's coming for you. It's coming for you. And she flipped out. Like, she started shaking and just literally was like, I was like, oh, you can't take it. You can't take it. Like, and I was like shaking my butt. I was just like, she hated me. She hated me. And you know what? She was mean to me. And I could see her doing this fat bitch. I can't believe they roomed me with this fat bitch. I could see it in her face, and
yes.
she would run every time she saw me.
It's this thing. I think, at the, I don't pretend to know about this. I don't have anorexia, so I don't know. But from what I know of it, I feel like at the core, it's about control. And feeling on some level like you have a lack of control in your life, and so then you try to control your food and control your weight. Yeah. And I think that Gwen Shamblin just had a huge need for control, and controlling herself was not enough. She had to control everybody else. She had to control other people and make them control themselves. And the more, it was like she was the supreme authority. She was like the voice of God. And, then that just overshadowed everything else. And then you ended up with institutionalized child abuse and required eating disorders, because I think the thing that really, that really tipped off the world to the fact that something was going on was in 2003, two members of her remnant church, they were told by Gwen to beat their child to make him more obedient, and they literally beat him to death and would lock him in a closet for days with just a bucket for a toilet and a picture of Jesus. It was very, and then, he died, and it's horrible. And then instead of saying, oh, this is horrible. This isn't what we meant at all. The church and Gwen sent a bunch of lawyers to defend them and try to get them off, and saying, oh, well, that's not what happened. Oh, he died from, he fell down. And it wasn't, what bothered Gwen was not that based on her advice, this child died. It was that this will look very bad for me.
Yeah.
And she wanted to get rid of it because it's all about appearance. And so, and the couple, fortunately it didn't work. And the couple was sentenced to, life plus 30 years. But it's like, and I think I will jump from that to, this whole thing about it being about image. We need to address her hair at some point, because I think there's like, there's this thing about, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. She looks like a troll doll, but in a way it was kind of smart of her, because I have this theory that celebrities they never really get big until you can draw a caricature of that celebrity and recognize that that's them. Like, and the example that I always give is Amy Winehouse did pretty well when she had like, flat hair and she was just, healthy and everything. But then once she got really thin and she got that big Ronette's beehive and the eyeliner, then suddenly, and the tiny little skirts, suddenly she had this look. And if you could draw a little Amy Winehouse cartoon and you'd know that it was her, and she got huge. And I feel like, especially with, with pop stars and stuff like that, that really applies, where it's like you have to have a thing, at least one thing. Cyndi Lauper has orange hair, Marilyn Monroe is blonde, Kim Kardashian has a big butt. They've got a thing. And Gwen Shamblin was, like a pretty-ish, like a pleasant-looking lady, but there was nothing real about her that really stood out. And so she got this, like, her thing became her hair. And as her power grew, her hair grew. And I think also she was just surrounded by so many people who would never tell her no, that it just like, nobody was going to tell her, you look ridiculous. But yeah. So.
Or then, this is the thing.
Yeah, please.
Or her makeup and hair people were being passive aggressive with her. Because that's what I think. Is they're like, oh, because to me, they're like, oh, she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I'm just going to keep going. Because you look great. Oh, do I? Oh, yeah. And like, if I had a bone to pick with her, that is some mean girl. That is some like really long game, mean girl game to play. Is like, no, you look great. And make her look ridiculous. I mean, that's kind of like what I'm thinking is, because I don't know if she was on drugs or if she was, because she obviously was not eating. She's so frail and so
she's
skinny.
So small. Yes. And the hair makes it even more. She's like this tiny child with a gigantic wig. And it's so strange to think that this like gaunt, absurd looking creature is commanding these people and has all this power,
But she did this is because I thought it was ridiculous myself. But then I went back and I'm like, oh, she has been embedded in that community since the 80s.
Yeah.
And that is what people don't get about people like Donald Trump. It's like, well, he's been embedded in our American culture doing like public relations since Home Alone 2. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's been in American culture since the 80s. Like, you can't, people are like, oh no, he just came out of nowhere. Like when it didn't work for Bloomberg, when Bloomberg tried to run for president, I'm a billionaire too. It's like, yeah, but you haven't been doing the public relations work. Like 2 episodes of 30 Rock is not, an SNL is not going to give you like the 30,
Yeah, and Trump had a TV show. He had
Yeah.
the Apprentice, and that was really, that. Yeah, no, it's true. And she was definitely like an established media persona and all of that stuff.
Oh, but in the evangelical church she was. I mean, people had
Yes.
done like the Way Down workshop. People knew it. Like she was, she was embedded in that community. So I I think for a lot of people who, from what I know, is when you're inside something, because I that was something that I don't think people looking on the outside, because I did read people being like, how could you, but when you're in it, like just think of academia. When you and I were in academia, some of the stuff that we were like, oh yeah, like you get in it, you get fed an idea, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Okay. And you get further along and further along, and then you keep getting more the bullshit gets more complex and more intricate and more like, oh yeah, okay, to the point you're contradicting yourself, and to the point, but you're so deep in it, it's normal to you now. It's
Yeah.
normal to you, and I think that is what it was for these people. They were so in. It was their community. It was, I mean, it was everything. So I think when you're in it, it is different. And I think, and as for somebody from, where we're from, people are just they're controlled by the only large employer in the city, which is the Catholic University. So they have that kind of fear in them. They have that mentality, whereas you come in from the outside, you're like, well, I don't understand why you're like this. I don't understand why you say this. It's because they're in it. So
Yeah. No, everybody's like, how could you fall for this cult? But then, it's easier to fall for cults than we think. It's not necessarily that people are just stupid.
yeah, no, people do it all the time. Like even in social justice movements, I'm like, are you sure you really believe some of the stuff that you're saying? Like, you really do? Or even in social, it's even harder now because you go home and it's like, for instance, like we saw in the documentary, Mr. Anger, he's like Keith, is it Kevin Anger or Keith Anger? He's one of the top people in the Remnant Church. He had people's Facebook passwords.
Yeah.
He owned their social media. He would be like, what are you looking at? Who are you talking to? He would go in there, and social media plays a role in keeping people in cults and more digitally surrounded in those mentalities. So I think it's even more, it's harder to leave a cult, and it's harder now to know are you doing groupthink, because social media is massive groupthink. It's that,
Yeah.
it is. It's like, well, your algorithm is starting to push you into this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Weird,
You're getting these YouTube video suggestions, and
it keeps you thinking, well, maybe, oh yeah, and it's not, it's something we need to be more aware of.
yeah. No, that's true. That's very true. And so then Joe comes into this let me see. So he meets Gwen, and then they get married in 2018. And, she was the biggest fish, I guess, as far as sugar mamas that he's caught.
Oh yeah.
And also, he was at this point where acting didn't work out, country music didn't work out, and so now he and Gwen were both doing something for each other. She was giving him money, but she was also giving him a role to play. And he was Mr. Gwen Shamblin, and he was the noble the noble church leader, but also like the cover of the romance novel, and letting her be like,
Yeah.
and then so it gave him, and they both were these sort of, like manipulative and unethical and completely concerned with surfaces. And what's interesting is that, well, two things are interesting. First, that Gwen had been married to David Shamblin for 40 years, from 1978 to 2018, and they'd had 2 children. And he'd been part of the Way Down workshop, and but then once she started her church, he wasn't quite so on board with it. But he was overweight, and that did not fit with her. It's all about how things look, and she could not have a fat husband and go around saying the stuff that she said. And so she sort of hid him away. And once she got enough money and power, Joe was exactly the kind of husband that she needed to project the image that she wanted to. And there's all this footage of their wedding, and it's like a fairy tale wedding, and it's all like, look at my happy ending, everybody, which might have played better with her followers if she had not previously forbid any woman to divorce their husbands in her church. But then suddenly she gets to divorce. And suddenly it's okay. But it's this double standard thing. And a lot of followers were citing that, the moment that she married Joe, as the moment when they were like, oh, I think that she might be a hypocrite. I think that this might be, that was sort of the beginning of the end. She thought it was the beginning of the beginning, but it was the beginning of the end in a way.
It wasn't the death of the little boy, the innocent little child. It wasn't that. It wasn't that, but
no. They got past but it's amazing. And so his ex-girlfriend Natasha, who we love, who's amazing. She's the most badass, amazing, because she's fighting for custody of her child with Joe, and she spent huge amounts of money on lawyers and couldn't afford anymore, and so she just started representing herself and just learning how to do it, and she won. She beat with all of her lawyers and money. Gwen was in the wrong, and Natasha, beat them and got custody of her kid, and now she's like going to law school, which is awesome. But But then after that, then comes the plane crash. So in 2021, just last year, Joe and Gwen and several other remnant church leaders were flying to a MAGA rally in Florida when their plane crashed in a lake shortly after takeoff in Tennessee. And the plane exploded and everyone died, and Joe was flying the plane. And Joe's whole thing was, he had all these hobbies that I think, various sugar mamas or different things had enabled him to do, falconry and flying and stuff like that. And he had just gotten a whole bunch of flight certifications, a bunch of new flight certifications that Gwen had paid for. And so he was flying this jet plane, which he'd barely just been certified to do it. And then I guess there was like no visibility, and he just didn't know what to do, and panicked or something. Who knows what actually happened, but they went down and crashed. And then there's this moment, very much like in Making of a Male Model, where these characters and the people who are playing them have these weird intersections. There's this moment in Tarzan in Manhattan when Tarzan was shot and he's recovering from, get the bullet wound. And he's remembering, he's having flashbacks to his childhood and his parents flying over, him with his parents flying over the jungle. And he keeps saying, the adult Tarzan keeps saying in his sleep, "Mama, we're going to crash. We're going to crash." And I was like, oh my God, be careful what you say in movies.
Right? I'm telling you. I am telling you. It is terrifying. It is so scary. The power film has. It really is. Like, if you think about, Shannon Doherty, her character, Brenda Walsh, had breast cancer.
Oh my
And now
God.
she has breast cancer.
Oh God.
Yeah, Jeff Conaway dies of a drug overdose in Making of a Male Model. He dies in one in real life. Joe Lara is gonna, he's dreaming that they're gonna crash and die in this plane, and then he does. It's
It's just, it's, hindsight is 2020 and everything, but that was a creepy little moment. Which taking that, I wanted to sort of looking at all of this, at all that we got from the miniseries and from the movie, like knowing all of this stuff about Joe Lara and Gwen Shamblin. How does that affect, because you've watched it a second time now, how does that affect your experience of the movie? Because I think there's a lot of people talk about this now, the experience of watching movies that are starring or made by people who we know have done bad things or have maybe allowed bad things to happen, which is another type of way of doing bad things.
Yeah.
And so what was that experience like for you? Were you finding yourself not being able to enjoy it as much knowing that, or were you able to ignore it, or?
Well, it's weird because I've been on set with terrible people, and I've worked for terrible people who've made movies that I love.
Yeah.
And I think because I already went through that before with certain Academy Award winning filmmakers,
Yep.
I still love those movies. But this movie, it was more like this. It was like I could watch the movie and appreciate it. Like I was knee deep in the movie because of Tony Curtis, because of Juan Lipschitz. I mean, the campiness and the just little things were really funny, and I can appreciate that. But him as somebody, okay, I would say this. Like, if I was like 14, and I was like, oh my God, like, had that like naivety and those hormones, I'd be like, oh, he's so beautiful. I'd give him anything, that kind of mentality. But as somebody who's older and knows the game, knows the hot, messed up guy, like, I get it. I've worked, I have to cast hot guys a lot, so I'm this isn't unnew to me. I saw it as what he was. It was a time capsule of somebody who was in their physical prime performing a role that they were suited for. And I was but I'm also older. So I was appreciated as a filmmaker, technically. I was like, oh, this is really good. Tony Curtis has the show chutzpah here. I mean, Tony Curtis had the, him and
pizzazz,
Kim. Yeah, they had the pizzazz. Like, they were carrying the movie. So, I think I watch Rosemary's Baby, and I'm like, oh, it's such a good movie. Roman Plex and comic cream, but yeah, I mean,
I mean, I've had this conversation a number of times with people, and I think, like, I mean, it's always a case by case basis. It depends on what the person did, and it depends on, but I think when people start getting very flippant about it and saying, oh, I don't want to watch that person's movies because that person is problematic, because they said this or did this, then I'm kind of like, oh, as opposed to all of the other movie stars that are really morally upright and kind and considerate people who treat everyone really well.
Right? That's what I'm saying.
But they think that because on Instagram, the people who are running these celebrities' social media and the PR people are very good at making you think that this is an approachable, kind, down-to-earth person. And you see them on Jimmy Kimmel or on, Fallon or something, and you think, oh, wow, how funny and charming. They must be a lot of fun. But if you've ever spent any time either in the actual film industry or even just in food service in New York or Los Angeles, then you know that people in showbiz overwhelmingly are ego monsters with the emotional intelligence of an 8-year-old, who are enabled to have the worst behavior. And they're selfish, narcissistic assholes with like the morals of a rattlesnake. And there's so much, I think, one thing that maybe we didn't take from Me Too, which I think maybe we should, is these are the people who got caught.
Yes.
But there's so much going on that we don't know about. There's so many people who have not been outed, who will never be outed. There's so much going on. So just don't think, watch these movies, enjoy these movies, but don't think that these people are your friends, because they're not your friends.
Exactly. And that is going back to the cult mentality, that media, the power that media plays in people's lives as a supplement to intimacy.
Yes.
That people think, okay, well, I come home, I watch the show Friends. They're a supplement for the lack of friends in my life. They're consistent, they're stable. They don't ask me for money. They don't have a drug addiction. They don't take the food out of my fridge, because our real lives, the real human interactions that people have are pretty, they're human interactions, meaning there's power exchange. What are you going to do for me? Like,
they're messy. Yeah.
They're messy. And those aren't things that people want to watch on TV. They want to watch the clean cut relationships with boundaries that don't overlap into how they truly do in real life, which is all types of weird, subtle oddness. And, I think that is the problem with media and celebrity, is that it does have a cult of personality, especially in our country. Like we are isolated. It's a new, what is it? A symptom of our wealth is that we are suffering from extreme loneliness.
Yeah.
So we spend time with these digital faces and these screen faces, and we think, oh, you are meaningful in my life. Like every time a celebrity dies, like we're like, oh my God. And it's like, well, where is and I've done it too. Like when Betty White died, it was like, oh,
yeah,
I lost it, and it's feels weird.
Speaking of Betty White, there's a sort of well-known story about someone meeting B. Arthur at an awards show and saying to her, "Oh, I always felt like you were my grandmother," and she said, "I'm not your fucking grandmother." And it's like, that may be rude, but she's right. Like, she's not your grandmother. She doesn't owe you anything.
That sounds like her. Shut the fuck up. Like, yeah, no, there is and even for me, that's why I don't like performing live shows. Like, people are like, well, why don't you do live shows? I'm like, because of the way women who look like me are treated in the public, which is, like, for instance, Britney Spears, she's blonde. It's always a blonde they're going after, like the,
yeah.
Like, so it's like, oh, you're female, you're alone, you're you obviously are doing a public performance, therefore you want us to bother you. You want us to come up and say something totally sexist, intrusive, rude, demeaning, and degrading, don't you? And if you don't like it, I'm just gonna follow you out to your car and bother you. It's like, yeah, why wouldn't I want to play live shows? For that reason, because people are disgusting. And because because us as a public, I think we give people we the media and how they treat other women and how they treat it's a trickle down effect. It's like, well, it gives the models behavior. Like you can talk to people like this.
Yeah, and it gives this sort of two-way toxic relationship between fan and star. Yeah, no, it's true. There's both sides of it. There's the fact that these celebrities are not necessarily the great upstanding people that their PR teams lead us to think that they are. And then there's also the fact that, they're not our friends and they don't owe us anything other than a good performance. And, this whole idea of a feigned interpersonal relationship is part of the whole mechanism of stardom. It's part of the business we call show, but that's not, it's not real, and it never has been. It's a weird thicket getting into all of this stuff, the relationship between the star and the audience and the audience and the star and the movie. And I guess the only thing that's real is the work. The work is there, and that's real.
That's mostly, I mean, that's what I'm saying is people, like, especially how movies are made. They're made in these, like, it's like high intensity, hit workouts. It's like, oh, hurry up, wait, we made this. Just they're made in fragments and in these, like, sprints. And you have all these parts that are like, okay, action, go. And the illusion of a movie is so amazing. Like, I love movies, but I guess what I'm getting at is I've been fortunate enough to know how they're made, to know all the parts. Now, if I didn't, I would be really easily fooled.
Yeah.
By a lot. And I'd also, give stars more weight than they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are the face of everyone else's work. And that is what you come to know by making stuff. It's like the actor is they're embodying certain actors have different relationships with their director and it can be more collaborative or heavy, but oftentimes they are kind of like they're the face of everyone else's work. Wardrobe, makeup, direction, cinematography, all of it. So I'm not saying they're puppets because I don't like when people are like, oh, they're just puppets. I'm like, well, no, there's a human in there. And like I've acted on screen too. So I know what it's like to be treated poorly by crew and people thinking, oh, you're just a puppet, you're meat. So yeah, I do think that your point is amazing and right on, because I do see a lot with like the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard thing. Like everyone's like, Amber Heard's awful, and I'm like, oh, as opposed to the more
Johnny Depp, who's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, this is just typical Hollywood nonsense. Like, don't pick a side. Don't make this personal. You guys don't have do you have access to $30,000 a month that you can spend on wine? No, then don't worry about these people. They're not in your life. This is rich people doing rich people things. Ignore it.
Yeah.
And anyway.
Yeah, no, I completely I'm with you on that. So this movie was not really a monologue kind of movie.
No.
But we did have one thing. I think that even though this is short, I think that you should take this
No,
this
you
joke.
do it. No,
really?
you
You
do
want me to
it.
do it?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
it has to be a call and response thing. So there's
Okay.
so you'll have
Hold
the
on.
line. Yeah, you say, what is that? So that's your line.
Okay. Give me a second. Okay.
Okay, so this is our Mary Catherine Gallagher monologue that we do every episode, and this is I can see this. This is a particular feeling. My feelings would be best expressed in a monologue from the TV movie Tarzan in Manhattan. And it's from the part where Tarzan is getting ready to go on the plane to New York, and his friend Joseph is talking to him. And he says, okay, remember, you're going to be up against something stronger than poisoned toads, more cunning than killer snakes, and fiercer than Simba the lion.
What is that?
New Yorkers. That scene.
I love that. Oh my god, I love that. I when I was watching that, I was like, okay, this is gonna be fun. I'm gonna have some memeable moments in this, you know.
That is a great. I mean, and also it's like it was 80s New York, and I love them showing the 80s New York location shoots, you know, really going there in Times Square and seeing that grittiness of like 1980s New York. I do love that. I always love seeing that, and I appreciated that. You know, I don't know if New Yorkers are fiercer than Simba the lion still, but we do know that if you're ordering at a bodega, you better know what you want when you get up to the line, because if you pause and are like, I think maybe they will cut you off and go to the next person. So,
I love that though, because that's how I am. I'm like, are you serious? You have been standing here for 20 minutes and you're now looking at the menu, you dumb. And like, I'm notorious for that.
So you better step up. You better step up there to that bodega and say, I want a bacon, egg, and cheese on a roll, salt and pepper, hot sauce. And that's it.
And they don't care if you're cute.
No.
You better
they
know.
Don't care. All right. Well, so I guess that's our episode. Thanks everybody for listening or watching, you know, wherever. There's a video version of this. If you're listening to us, there's a video version of this podcast on YouTube. If you'd like to watch us and you know, review the show on Spotify or Apple Music or, you know, wherever, and follow us on social media. We've got an Instagram at Mother Murderer Podcaster, and also a TikTok, which Katie manages wonderfully and makes these really funny content. And then join us for our next episode, our Halloween episode, where we'll be covering the 1985 ABC TV movie, The Midnight Hour.
Our YouTube is Mother Murder Podcaster as well. Everything is pretty consistent across the board.
Good branding.
And thank you for listening. Like, subscribe. See you later.
Bye.